Looks like we found ourselves in an apocalypse of sorts. Bummer. Team Fortress 2, one of my favorite online shooters, the sequel to the granddaddy of the hero shooter subgenre. Its influence can be felt in many modern games, thanks to how much leftover room there was in the genre for further innovation. I just recently finished going through replay phase of Team Fortress 2, and the game has, unsurprisingly, a very active online player base to this day. Thanks to the tight gameplay and sheer variety of chaos offered from the 9 classes, it's no surprise that the game can sustain such a healthy player base after all this time. During this time I thought to myself, hey, I really like this game. I'd like to get a physical copy so that should the server shut down hypothetically someday, I'd still own a legitimate, tangible version of it. Trust me, if there's a time where my physical games will come in handy, it's during the apocalypse.
Oh my god, we're doomed!
Don't worry guys, I'll save us. Look, I have my old Xbox and all my games. I even have Black Ops. We can play zombies forever. Physical copies do exist for PC, but you won't get far with just the disc. It's the code that's in the game box that activates the game on your account for whatever digital game storefront it's tied to. In this case, Steam. The CD is just an alternative way to install the game if your internet is too slow to download the game at a decent speed. And that's just it. You still require an internet connection when running the game for the first time for authentication purposes. So in this scenario, the disc is just useless plastic. Fret not. There are versions of Team Fortress 2 that you can play straight out of the disc. The Orange Box, a collection of some of Valve's big hit titles, came out on PC October 10th, 2007, but also for the powerhouse consoles of the 7th generation. The Xbox 360 version was released alongside the PC version, and the PS3 version came out 2 months after. For the Apocalypse, this is the way to go. Since on top of it being ready to go from the disc insert, it's also a lot more straightforward to play in general. There are a few pieces required to play games on a console. Compare that to what's needed for a PC. On top of that, a PC is more likely to require more electricity to run than a console. Yes, electricity isn't as accessible during the apocalypse, but that goes against my scenario, so shut up! When starting the game, you're greeted by the Valve logo screen. Creepy, but a classic. The wall of text with the legal mumbo-jumbo that follows took me off guard. It's so big and legible compared to what it looks like on PC. The bigger text is likely a result of the consideration of CRT TVs. HD video wasn't really standardized for gaming until the 8th generation of consoles. So during the 7th generation, developers had to make text big enough to read on a CRT TV, in the likely case that the user was playing their game on one. Advanced Warfare is the perfect example of these considerations in action.
Advanced Warfare.
Afterwards, we're shifted to a select screen. There are a bunch of other games on this list, probably some insignificant titles that have no importance to the history of gaming that are not worth noting, and at the tail end, Team Fortress 2. Okay, we're in. Let's hop straight into a match. Oh yeah, there's no internet during the apocalypse. Well, that's no problem. We can start a local match offline and get things started with bots.
Mission begins in 60 seconds. 3,
Alrighty,
2,
here we go. What? Huh, where is everyone? Looks like I forgot to set up the bots. Maybe I have to go into some sort of deep menu to set them up. Huh? None. Well, that stinks. You can still fiddle around and get a feel of how each character plays, but not in relation to other players. There are no bots of any sort, it's just you and empty maps. Beyond this dead end, is there anything noteworthy with this game, or is this all that there is to see? Well, there most certainly is, depending on who you ask. This version of Team Fortress 2 is a vanilla version of the game. If you want to play online, you'd have to update the game, but straight out of the disc, which is how we're playing this game throughout the apocalypse, it's the game as it was when it first released. However, even when updated, compared to its PC counterpart, the changes are so negligible that it may as well be vanilla. The version of Team Fortress 2 on the 7th generation of consoles got very little support. On the 360, it got almost 2 years of support, which may seem like a huge window for there to have been many substantial updates, but considering that many of the mechanics that were introduced, which are now considered essential elements to the core gameplay, weren't introduced until after this point in time, I guess 2 years wasn't a lot for this game in the long run. The game received only 4 patches, which amounted to a couple of bug fixes and some added modifiers for server hosting. It's a pretty sad legacy for Team Fortress 2 on Xbox 360, but it's better than the PS3's measly 1 patch, which was to fix issues with how the game couldn't handle the player having more than a certain amount of friends on their PSN account, amongst other minor things. By comparison, on PC, Team Fortress 2 has received more than 700 patches, so yeah, womp womp. So because this is a launch version of the game, we can see how far Team Fortress 2 has come, and it's come a long way. There are only 6 maps on offer, with the basics for game modifiers, that being time limit, player limit, score limit, and team balance. The game type is tied to the map, so no mixing and matching between them. This leaves a less for variety than there could be. Most characters, obviously barring subtle balancing changes, aren't very different from the original release. The only character that has any substantial differences is the engineer. Unlike on PC, where each of his 4 constructions, minus the mini-sentry, have 2 upgrade stages, in the 360 version, only the turret can be upgraded, and the other constructions are built as is. The dispenser and teleporter are both stuck in the stage 1 modes, with the dispenser replenishing 40 metal at a time, and the teleporter's recharge rate being 10 seconds. Thank gosh for these changes, considering how frantic matches can get nowadays. Having to use the stock constructions nowadays would just be an absolute pace killer. The Pyro also has a noteworthy difference. He doesn't have his air blast ability. It's a minor addition, but it's quite the game changer. It turns it from a pain in the ass to a major pain in the ass, but with a useful and legitimate area denial ability. And the Spy has the ability to disguise himself into anyone on both teams. Okay, that's actually something you can still do and could have always done, but it's something that I didn't notice you can do until now. More subtle changes lie in the graphics. Despite the game running on hardware that is almost 2 decades old, in some ways it looks better than how the game looks on my PC, which left me kinda confused. What ticked me off of this is the Scout's scattergun. It looks way shinier here. I thought maybe it could have been a side effect of playing the game on a huge flat screen, but that didn't seem right. After sitting on it for some time, it came to me. A few years ago I saw the video Crobcat made about Team Fortress 2, showcasing the graphical downgrades that the game got 10 years after its release. Wow, it all clicked together. I wasn't crazy. I felt like a detective genius who solved the mystery of the graphics. Except that someone else solved the mystery. This just confirmed my hunches. These graphical downgrades don't ruin the game. I understand their necessity for optimization, but it will be a bummer returning to the PC version after seeing how good the game looked before. Beyond that, in regards to its technical performance, considering it's running 720p 30 FPS, looks pretty good and controls smooth enough. The controls are leagues above on PC obviously, but I wouldn't write this off as being a terrible way to playing the game. It's not an important thing to point out considering you could change them, but it's funny how weird the default controls are. It's quite reflective of where gaming was at this point in time. While the 7th generation of consoles went on to being known for the major streamlining and standardization of gaming, partially thanks to every game wanting to be Call of Duty, it still took a while to get there in the late 2000s. Looking at what else the game has to offer, really the only thing that is beyond just sitting in an empty game or looking at menus is the commentary mode.
Welcome to Team Fortress 2.
Well, thanks, Mr. Newell. I feel quite welcomed. In here, you just walk around the map and listen to these nodes, with each offering a different slice of commentary regarding considerations that the devs made when figuring out the balance of this game. You can either do it manually, by walking up to each node and pressing the right trigger, or just skipping to the next one with the Q by pressing the left trigger. Sweet! Managed to fill up my Uber meter. Let it rip! No! There are a lot of cool dev insights that, as a gamer, you likely haven't considered or noticed in the map/game design.
Effects required that custom code be written by the programmers.
Some of the nodes give demonstrations with some of the character models showing off what it is that the person is talking about. But sometimes what they're saying gets a little too overpowered by the examples showcased, and it's difficult to hear what it is that they're saying because that's a part of the And that's Team Fortress 2 on Xbox 360 during the apocalypse. Unfortunately, without access to an Xbox Live Gold account, there isn't really much to do here. Outside of apocalyptic reasons, there's little reason to get the version on consoles, since the fee of entry is money. And the alternative on PC, which, by the way, has more players, has received more support, and is overall the better version of the game, the fee of entry for that is no money. I only pulled the trigger on getting this version because I was lucky enough to win an eBay auction for not a lot of money. For a quarter of the usual asking price, it didn't seem like it hurt to find out what this game is all about. The idea of pulling off a LAN party with this game sounds pretty cool, but in reality would probably be impossible to pull off since that would require getting at least 8 Xbox 360 consoles, 8 controllers, 8 copies of the game, 8 TVs and 8 butts and seats willing to play the game to get a worthwhile match going. Standing on its own merits, without access to an internet connection, the orange box on the Xbox 360, as it pertains to Team Fortress 2, doesn't offer much other than being a novelty piece. It'd only be worth your while if you are a collector or an enthusiast of Valve or gaming history. Or if you're a big fan of Team Fortress 2. I think what really could have saved this game from being somewhat worthwhile beyond collection reasons is bots. Yes, that'd be a bit unnecessary considering it's an online multiplayer shooter, but this was the translation of this game to a platform where, unlike PC, has a paywall to access the internet, something not everyone will necessarily be able to pay for. It must have been something that was considered during the porting process in some way, and it's a shame that they didn't throw a bone for the 360 players at the very least, but they have no obligation to have done so, and with the PS3 having free online, it wasn't worth implementing bots for the sake of one platform. In a non-apocalypse scenario, if you really wanted to play Team Fortress 2, but for whatever reason the only device that you own that can play Team Fortress 2 is an Xbox 360, then sure, I could see there being some merit in getting this version. Any Team Fortress 2 is good Team Fortress 2. It's just that new Team Fortress 2 is better Team Fortress 2. Achievement hunters may get a kick out of this thing. You can get some of the achievements on your own, but it goes without saying you'll need an Xbox Live Gold account if you want to 100% it. On a final note, for the purposes of this video, I used my Xbox One X to capture game footage. The orange box has received the Xbox One X enhancements, so that means a resolution boost, better anti-aliasing, and a more stable performance. It does run better on all fronts compared to the 360, but the only improvement that was really noticeable was the anti-aliasing. Things can get quite jaggy on the 360. There is one technical quirk on the One X. When holding down the trigger button, the controller will stop rumbling after about 5 seconds, after which you'll have to release the trigger button and press it again to get the controller to rumble again. I don't know if this is an emulation bug, or something that was implemented on purpose when the game is running on the Xbox One, but that's a thing. Something else that I found to be rather odd, when I first tried the game on the 360, I remember seeing the gun sway being a lot more drastic when looking around, which kind of reminded me of the old Call of Duty games on the Wii U, with how you can see the gun model in ways you usually couldn't in the standard version of the games. However, when I came back to record some footage of it, it was gone. I don't know if this was something that was changed in the updates, because I didn't update the game on my 360 until after I tried it on the One X, so I didn't have an immediate point of comparison. But I tried to remove the update data and the gun sway still wasn't there. Maybe I'm babbling on about something that was never there, but this was too distinct to not have happened. It's worth a mention in the case that I wasn't seeing things. So I guess that's it. I guess there's no way to get a functional and practical version of Team Fortress 2 with you during the apocalypse. Oh, that makes me so sad. I need to distract myself. Wow. This device sure is nifty. It's small, it has a clamshell design, and it has a built-in screen and battery. Wait a second. Oh, laptops.